Welcome to the Steampunk Years Volume 7. Let's continue the story. Silas stood at the edge of the statue, watching Snow seated on the bench, her gaze lifted in wonder as butterflies drifted through the air. The realm around them was small, no more than a few hundred feet across, ringed by trees that enclosed a quiet clearing. At its heart lay a still pond, and rising from the water's center was the statue of a marble horse, her own suggestion brought into form. The next additions had been the bench and the butterflies, bright wings of every hue flickering through the light like living jewels. "Good. You're navigating these places well," Silas said as Snow's wide eyes followed the butterflies in delight. "I like this one the most," she answered with a smile. "A cozy place with nothing but beauty." Silas stepped closer, kneeling by the bench to examine the soft ground. "Try a flower bed next." Snow turned her attention to the earth. Slowly, blossoms unfurled, petals of every color blooming across the clearing in a sudden tide of life. "That's good," Silas said, studying the flowers with approval. "You've shaped a realm of your own. I think it's time to try another, larger this time." Snow looked at him curiously. "Use my imagination like before?" "Yes," Silas replied. His voice was calm but steady. "Do you feel ready?" Snow met his eyes and nodded. "Yes." At his motion, a shimmer gathered in the air. An archway took form in the grass, its threshold glimmering with promise. "Then let's go," he said. They stepped through the arch and into the next realm, Snow close behind Silas. For an instant he raised a hand against the brilliance, waiting for the shapes to steady and the world to come into focus. What emerged before them was a landscape of confections. Trees lifted sugar-spun crowns of pink and blue cotton candy. A wide field stretched into the distance, its neat rows heavy not with grain but with gumballs, chocolate bars, and bright-wrapped sweets. The air itself seemed lighter, tinged with syrup and laughter. Silas glanced at Snow. She was radiant, eyes wide with delight. She was good at this, better than he had dared to hope. Once the machine was deactivated, someone would have to return the key to the realm of green mist and seal it away. If something happened to him, she was the only one who could. He had spent the past week guiding her into the meditative state that opened these spaces. Each trial had only confirmed her gift. He remembered the realms he had built at first, towering cities of steam-powered machines, endless countrysides painted in sepia calm. They bore his hand, his history. But this belonged wholly to her, a realm of whimsy and wonder, spun from innocence. Snow knelt beside a bush of pillowy marshmallow and brushed its soft surface. "This is what I imagined," she said softly. "A place made of sweetness." "And you did a fantastic job," Silas replied. "Candy everywhere," she added with a grin. "Now try to fill in the details like you did with the flower bed." She closed her eyes, and at once the horizon lifted. Mountains rose, their peaks edged in sugar glaze, and above them clouds swelled, vast curls of cotton candy echoing the treetops. Silas looked down in surprise as his own clothing shifted. His lab coat dissolved into stripes of red and white, a candy seller's jacket with matching trousers and a wide-brimmed hat. Snow's attire shimmered too. Her black dress with floral embroidery melted into a silver gown scattered with candy motifs. A tiara settled into her hair, and a wand appeared in her hand, its tip glittering with sugar light. "How am I doing?" she asked. "Good," he answered, though inside the thought flickered, maybe too good. Just then a river shimmered into being, its banks edged in peppermint sticks. A boat of polished peppermint bark floated into view, rowed by a gingerbread oarsman who lifted his arm in invitation. "Let's go," Snow cried, running toward the boat with gleeful abandon. Silas lingered a moment, scanning the surreal landscape of sugar and shine. Then, more slowly, he followed. The peppermint boat drifted smoothly along the sugar-glass river. On the banks, figures began to appear, conjured as if from the air itself. Some were tall, their bodies stacked from chocolate bars, arms and legs breaking off into neat squares. Others were pliant and translucent, fashioned from gummy, their colors glowing faintly in the sunlight. Snow lifted her wand, and with a flick summoned still more wonders. Crystalline buildings that gleamed like spun glass, and butterflies with transparent wings that shimmered like barley candy. They floated past in delicate swarms, refracting light into sweet prisms. Silas watched in silence. He had an imagination, but never like this. His realms had always bent themselves to discipline, to the logic of machines and fields. Yet here, Snow moved as though she had always belonged, effortless, fluid, shaping each vision with ease. Could it be the fracture, he wondered? The only human to ever survive a fracture's touch. Perhaps that mark gave her a gift here, a bond with spaces even he could not fully grasp. If only his own mentors were still alive, but time had claimed them long ago, leaving him with questions that echoed unanswered. He blinked and pulled himself back. The world had grown livelier, bright structures multiplying on the shore, music rising from unseen streets, a chorus of cheerful notes drifting through the air. Ahead, the river branched. One channel curved back toward the candy town, glittering with festivity. The other narrowed into a wooded passage, its shadows darker, quieter. The gingerbread oarsman rested his peppermint oar and looked to them. "Which way do you want to go?" Snow hesitated. Her gaze lingered on the forested path, though her eyes slid toward Silas as if asking permission. "Back into town," he said gently, "where it's familiar." She nodded, though her shoulders sagged with the smallest trace of disappointment. The oarsman turned the boat, guiding it toward the brighter waters. Silas stepped to Snow's side. "Do you remember what I told you about losing yourself in these places?" "Yes," she answered, her voice quiet. He settled into the gondola seat, eyes on the distance. "Always stay close to the shore. Always remain in control of your own journey." Snow smiled faintly, the understanding clear in her eyes. Silas thought of colleagues he had once known, those who had wandered too far, consumed by realms they could not return from. He would not let her fall into the same fate. "That's today's lesson," he said softly. Snow sat beside him, her gaze drifting back to the fork in the river they were leaving behind. "Always stay close to the shore," she repeated. Silas nodded, approving. "Good. Now let's get back to base." Their eyes opened, and the base returned around them. The candy realm dissolved like mist, leaving only the dim, echoing gymnasium, an old training hall most had long since forgotten. Abby sat on a folding chair by the wall, a magazine open in her lap. She looked up, her voice calm. "You're back." Snow's face lit up. She darted across the floor toward her. "You'll never guess what I saw, sugar butterflies, skies with marshmallow clouds. It was the most amazing place." Abby closed the magazine, reached out, and gently squeezed her hand. A small smile tugged at her lips. "Go tell Cogwave," she said. "He loves stories." Snow's laughter trailed as she dashed out into the hallway, her footsteps quick and bright. The smile faded from Abby's face. She sighed and turned her gaze on Silas. "I hope you know what you're doing. As her caretaker and as her counselor, I think this is a mistake. Her mind is already fragile." Silas rubbed the back of his neck. "She's the only one who can do this if anything happens to me. And she's the most gifted student I've ever mentored." Abby's eyes narrowed with quiet disapproval. She gave a curt nod, then left the gymnasium without another word. Next chapter. The meeting hall buzzed with restless energy, the kind that came from gathering too many soldiers in one place with not enough action to keep their hands busy. The scent of stale coffee and iron lingered in the air, mixing with the faint traces of oil and sweat from those who had come straight from their shifts. Silas sat toward the back, arms crossed, half listening to the murmured conversations around him. These so-called high-priority meetings were rarely what they claimed to be, and judging by the weary sighs echoing through the hall, he wasn't the only one who knew it. At the front of the room, a soldier with deep bags under his eyes and an expression teetering between exhaustion and resignation shuffled a stack of papers in his hands. He didn't bother with introductions, just lifted a sheet with the enthusiasm of a man well past his breaking point. "Here is a list of junk the crew had to clean up last week alone." A low groan rippled through the crowd, punctuated by a few scattered chuckles. Silas arched an eyebrow. "Oh, this should be good." The soldier cleared his throat and began reading. 3 busted pistons, a crate of empty whiskey bottles, an entire steam gauge someone just left in the mess hall, a single boot. He paused, frowning. "With a rat in it." That earned a full laugh from the audience. He pressed on. "A broken automaton arm, a dented brass kettle, and—" He hesitated, then rubbed his temples. "A ceremonial sword stuck in a fence post." The laughter doubled. Silas smirked, shaking his head. He had to admit this was more entertaining than expected. Then Just as the room was tipping from amusement to outright chaos, the high-ranking officer overseeing the meeting, a grizzled, stiff-backed man with a chest full of medals, stepped onto the stage. He raised a hand, and the noise dropped to a dull murmur. "Junk is no joke," he declared, his voice full of absolute seriousness. That was it. The room erupted. Laughter spilled through the hall. A few soldiers doubling over, others clapping their hands against the tables in wheezing fits. Even the exhausted man with the list let out a breath that was suspiciously close to a chuckle. Silas glanced at his watch. "Well," he muttered to no one in particular, "better entertainment than doing nothing." He leaned back in his seat, watching the show unfold. It wasn't the most ridiculous thing he'd ever seen, but it was close. Next chapter. Eliza had been waiting for this. The soft knock at the door came exactly when she expected. She exhaled, smoothing the creases in her sleeves before standing. The door opened slowly, revealing Sky's small frame, shoulders drawn tight, eyes red from crying before she even arrived. Eliza stepped aside, offering no words at first, only a silent invitation. Sky hesitated before stepping inside, moving like the weight of the air itself pressed against her. She didn't sit until Eliza gestured toward the chair. Even then, she perched on the edge of it, hands clasped in her lap, knuckles white from how tightly she held herself together. The blue swirls around her, normally fluid, moving with the rhythm of her presence, shifted sluggishly now, like ripples in still water. Sad, uncertain, hurt. Sky's voice was small, cracking at the edges. "They have been in contact with Saul this entire time." Eliza met her gaze with steady understanding. "Yes." Sky's breath hitched. Her fingers curled, digging into the fabric of her pants. The blue swirls dimmed, swirling slower, reflecting the depth of her devastation. Eliza lowered her voice. "I understand why you're feeling this way." She leaned in slightly, her tone gentle but unwavering. "You were brought here, told to report findings back that your people already knew." Sky looked down, staring at the floor as if it might have answers. "Then why bring me here?" she murmured, more to herself than to Eliza. Silence stretched between them. Then, after a moment, her voice returned, softer now. "Was it me?" Eliza reached out, taking Sky's trembling hand in hers. Her grip was firm, reassuring. "Yes," Sky swallowed, her lip trembling. "To study me," she whispered, realization settling into place. The Saul energy. Eliza didn't react. She didn't need to, because Sky already knew the answer. The room felt smaller, heavier. Sky's entire life had been rewritten in a single moment, and all she could do was try to breathe through the weight of it. Next chapter. Abby, Zeke, and Cogwave stepped into the open air, the cool night settling over the base like a heavy blanket. The quiet hum of distant machinery echoed in the background, mixing with the occasional chirp of night insects. They moved toward a small outdoor area, where a narrow pond reflected the dim glow of overhead lamps. Abby let out a slow breath, shaking her head. "The Admiral can't be trusted. This makes things difficult." Zeke only nodded. Difficult was putting it lightly. The three of them reached the worn wooden bench beside the water. Abby took a seat first, running a hand through her hair before turning toward Zeke. Her voice was quieter this time. Waited. "Things have gotten dangerous. I need to think of my children. I hope you understand." Zeke studied her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "Of course. But if they come after us, you'll be the first person they question if things go south." Abby exhaled, fishing a cigarette from her coat pocket and lighting it with a practiced flick of her fingers. She took a slow drag, then met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I can handle it." She blew the smoke into the wind, watching as it swirled and faded. "You don't get to be a base counselor all these years without knowing what to say and what not to say." There was no hesitation in her voice, no doubt. Zeke believed her. A mechanical whir broke the silence as Cogwave shifted slightly, the faint glow of his internal gears flickering beneath his metallic plating. "We will take care of Snow," he stated, his tone as precise as ever. "Her and I have achieved a near-identical social bond approaching yours. I estimate 94%. Abby turned to Cogwave, a soft smile playing at the edge of her lips. "She's taken to you. Please don't let her down. I just had a long talk with her saying my goodbyes." "I am not programmed to fail," Cogwave responded flatly, though a hint of something almost resembling sincerity lingered beneath his words. Zeke smirked. "You know how to reach us." Abby took one last drag from her cigarette, then flicked the embers into the dirt. She exhaled through her nose, then winked at Zeke. I always do. The unspoken promise hung in the air between them as the night stretched on. And somewhere in the distance, the wind carried the faint, lingering scent of smoke and secrets. Next chapter. The air in the meeting room was thick with tension, the kind that came before a mission that held too many unknowns. The team sat around the large metal table, the hum of the overhead lights casting elongated shadows against the walls. Zeke leaned forward, fingers steepled, eyes scanning the room. Okay, ideas. Silas was the first to speak, stretching his arms behind his head with an almost casual air. Obviously we play along. When the key lights up, we go to the fracture, close it. Skye shook her head. The heavily populated areas. We have civilians to worry about. Zeke shifted his gaze to Eliza. Go ahead. Eliza hesitated for a brief second, her eyes flickering toward the empty seat where Abby usually sat. Ever wonder what you could do with a 5-inch flying drone and a personal escape device? Eliza smiled. I can get us the tech to bypass any soldiers and drop a few PEDs. We teleport in next to the fracture, Snow heals it, we get out before they even know we were there. Zeke sat back, considering. No casualties, no destruction. Cogwave, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. It's a high probability this will work 1 or 2 times, but they will catch on and adapt. Zeke nodded. Then we worry about that when it happens. We have 4 fractures left to deal with. Let's focus on now. A quiet voice broke the moment. I see them in my mind. They are so lost. Everyone turned toward Snow. Her eyes were distant, unfocused, lost in something they couldn't see. Cogwave, without hesitation, reached for her hand. His metallic fingers curled gently around hers, his touch cool and steady. It will be okay. His voice lacked emotion, as it always did, but there was something in the way he held her hand that made the words feel almost human. No one spoke after that, because there was nothing left to say. The meeting was over, and the mission had begun. Next chapter. The dim glow of the monitors flickered across the room, illuminating Ron and Don's determined faces as they sat hunched over their keyboards. The rapid clatter of keys and the sharp clicks of mice filled the air, the tension palpable as they navigated through the chaotic battlefield on screen. Eliza perched on the edge of the desk, one leg crossed over the other, watching with an amused smirk. She rested her chin on her hand, eyes flicking between their screens with practiced ease. Should have used your ultimate, Donnie, dear. No. Don groaned, his fingers flying across the keys in desperation. Ron, ever the strategist, leaned forward, eyes locked onto the action. I can save the game. I can. His fingers danced across the keyboard, his character slipping into a densely packed crowd on the screen. Eliza's smirk widened. Now. A heartbeat later, Ron struck. His attack rippled through the enemy forces, a calculated move that set off a chain reaction. Explosions bloomed across the screen. Enemy health bars plummeted. The chaos settled into silence as the final foe fell. The words flashed across the screen, victory. Yes. Ron threw his arms up triumphantly. Don shot up from his chair, eyes wide with disbelief. You did it! Eliza grinned, clapping her hands together in slow applause. Legendary. A moment of silence hung between them before all 3 burst into laughter, the adrenaline of the match still buzzing through the air. For a brief moment, in a world of fractures, soldiers, and looming threats, nothing else mattered. Just the game, just the victory, and the fleeting moment of joy that came with it. Eliza leaned against the desk, arms crossed, surveying the two as they basked in the afterglow of their victory. But playtime was over. Okay, boys, this week we're having visitors. Ron and Don both looked up from their screens, their post-match excitement fading into curiosity. Yes, of course I cleared it with the Admiral, Eliza added, rolling her eyes at their unspoken skepticism. Don leaned back in his chair. Is one of them Cogwave? I'd love to see him in action. Ron nodded in agreement, his eyes lighting up. That thing is an amazing, once-in-a-lifetime creation. The power source he uses, it's a shifting energy that travels between dimensions, weaving itself around while retaining all programming and memory. Don tilted his head, intrigued. I wonder where they even got that energy. Ron lowered his voice, glancing around as if someone might be listening. I heard it was from a crashed UFO, Don snorted. Yeah, bullshit. Not bullshit. Then a knock at the door. The door eased open and Skye stepped inside. The soft glow of her blue swirls cast a gentle light around the room. shifting in slow, mesmerizing waves as she moved. The screens, the metal desks, even the dust in the air seemed to take on a faint, ethereal shimmer under her presence. Don's eyes widened. "Oh, wow, Sky." Ron straightened in his chair, suddenly looking much more alert. "Oh, hi. What can we help you with?" Eliza smirked. "No need to get up, boys. I'm just showing her around." Ron nodded rapidly. Okay, sure." Don, in his rush to be somewhat helpful, stumbled forward, catching his foot on a chair leg. The clatter echoed through the room as 2 chairs tumbled over with him. Sky blinked, watching the spectacle unfold in silence. Still on the floor, Don propped himself up on his elbows, his brain firing off thoughts faster than his mouth could process them. "I was just wondering if there was, like, a concert of 1,000 of you guys. Would it be too bright to even see anything?" Ron groaned and immediately crumpled a piece of paper from his desk. Thwack! The paper ball hit Don square in the forehead. "Shut up," Ron muttered. Eliza rolled her eyes, exhaling. "You'll have to excuse these gentlemen no manners." She turned toward the 2, lifting her hand and making the universal wave under the throat gesture. They got the message. She turned back to Sky with a smirk. "Now, if you don't mind, Sky and I are having a look around." Sky gave a small nod, the soft glow of her energy shifting slightly as she followed Eliza out. Ron and Don remained frozen for a few more seconds. Then Ron sighed, rubbing his face. "I swear, man." Don picked up the paper ball and tossed it back at him. "What?" It was a valid question. Eliza led Sky down the quiet corridor, the sound of their footsteps softened by the cold metal flooring. The air here was different, sterile, humming with a faint charge of energy. They stepped into a dimly lit room where a transparent tank stood in the center, its contents shifting like mist caught in slow motion. The soft glow inside pulsed, swirling in delicate patterns of white, tendrils of smoke twisting within. Sky's breath hitched as she stepped forward, drawn to it. "Soul energy." Her voice was barely a whisper. "But it's white, smoky." Eliza stood beside her, the shifting hues reflecting against her skin, blue mixing with white, soft and strange. "This is what they wanted from you." Eliza's voice was steady, but there was something unreadable in her tone. "Your readings. To stabilize this." Sky stepped back abruptly, her eyes narrowing. "Readings, but I didn't agree to anything." Eliza turned, meeting her gaze without hesitation. She didn't need to say it aloud. Sky's expression darkened. "My quarters." A pause, then, her voice sharper. "Did they put sensors there?" Eliza hesitated just for a fraction of a second. Nothing intrusive like cameras or microphones. A small exhale. "But yes." Sky's hands curled into fists. The blue swirls around her flickered erratically, betraying the storm of emotions beneath her calm exterior. "If they are still in contact, I can reach home, maybe." "No," Eliza cut her off. Sky blinked, startled. Eliza's expression was unreadable, but her voice carried no doubt. "They were telling the truth about the alignment. You're stuck here for another 20 years. Silence stretched between them. Sky swallowed hard, then slowly nodded. The weight of the truth settled on her shoulders, pressing her down, but she didn't break. Instead, she lifted her chin. "Show me the weapons." Eliza studied her for a moment, then nodded. Without another word, she turned, leading Sky deeper into the facility. Next chapter. The city stretched out before them, a vast sprawl of trembling lights and quiet motion. From up here, everything seemed to hum, the slow pulse of traffic below, the low thrum of air vents, the whisper of wind slipping between rooftop rails. Somewhere far off, a train howled, its echo fading into the electric dusk. The rooftop itself was still, almost sacred. The only movement came from the old tabby cat curled in Sky's lap, its fur rising and falling with each steady breath. She stroked it absently, her other hand cradling a half-empty glass of champagne that glinted faintly in the skyline's reflection. Eliza sat beside her, back against the weathered brick, a bottle at her side and her boots stretched out toward the ledge. Her eyes looked tired, but softer than usual, the kind of soft that only came when the fighting was done for the day, when all that was left was honesty. Sky lifted her glass, her voice laced with wry grace. "To being complete idiots and being led astray." Eliza smiled faintly, clinking her glass against Sky's. "I'll drink to that." They sat for a while in silence, facing the spot where the portal had once shimmered. Now it was only empty air, an absence that seemed to hum louder than sound itself. "Just think," Sky murmured, her eyes tracing the endless rows of lights. "Some people will just lie and deceive for no reason." "Yep," Eliza sighed, stretching her legs until her boots touched the edge of the concrete. "And we keep trying to give them reasons anyway." Sky tilted her head back against the wall, letting the night wind stir her hair. "I never had it in me," she said quietly. "I spent my life protecting others from shitheads who would lie, cheat, and steal." Eliza let out a dry chuckle. "I wish I could say the same. I was too busy trying to please my parents, mostly my dad." Sky's expression dimmed, her gaze falling to the sleeping cat. "My dad. He was such an asshole. I called him the monster." The words hung in the air like smoke, too heavy to disperse. Eliza didn't rush to fill the silence. She only nodded, eyes half-lidded, and leaned her head back beside Sky's. "This is the only place I'd want to be right now." Sky smiled faintly, that small, wistful curve that carried both sorrow and survival. "The evil assassin," Eliza muttered after a pause, her voice drifting lazily toward the sky. "Has a nice ring to it." Sky turned to her, brow arched. "Sounds like a tough job, on your conscience." Eliza reached for the bottle, poured herself another glass, and swirled the golden liquid as though searching for truth in the reflection. "I never actually assassinated anyone." A beat passed. Then, almost perfectly timed, both women broke into laughter, loud, unrestrained, helpless laughter that spilled into the open night and scattered among the rooftops. The cat flicked its tail once but didn't bother to move. For now, beneath the breath of the wind and the wide, indifferent stars, the weight of the world could wait. Next chapter. The team stood assembled, a dark line against the metallic grays of the base. The black uniforms Eliza had proposed lent them a kind of solemn unity, every strap and buckle perfectly aligned, every holster sealed and ready. They looked like order forged from chaos, precision made flesh. And yet Snow stood apart. Where the others wore shadow, she wore light. A flowing white dress draped her form, catching the overhead lamps as though the fabric itself held a quiet luminescence. At the hem, a single black rose had been stitched, an elegant contradiction, a reminder that even purity keeps its shadows close. Cogwave, the strategist in silence, had folded his frame into Zeke's pack, his sleek body compacted to a travel form, sensors still alive beneath the surface. He didn't need eyes to see. He watched through air currents, vibrations, the faint pulse of sound. Zeke adjusted the pack's straps and looked once around the team. "Let's move," he said, his tone steady. "You all know the plan. Follow the script. Watch for tricks." Silas nodded, closing a small holographic interface with a flick of his wrist. Snow traced the signal to this sector, the Waterford region. At that name, Zeke's movements paused. His hand tightened slightly on the strap. His eyes darkened, distant. "Home," he murmured. The word was barely sound, more breath than speech. Eliza caught it, but said nothing. Instead, she gave a half grin and a quick thumbs up as Sally, seated at the control console, ran her hands along the switches in smooth, practiced rhythm. Engines rumbled to life, their song building from a low vibration beneath the floor to a full-bodied hum that filled the air. The room trembled. Lights shifted to amber. And then they lifted. The base fell away below them, its metallic sprawl shrinking to a grid of fading lights. Clouds opened like doors above the horizon. Ahead, the sky widened, and the world tilted toward what awaited. The ship's interior thrummed with a low, constant heartbeat, the engines whispering through steel, the floor humming faintly beneath their boots. Dim light traced the edges of the command deck, glinting off metal consoles and half-drained coffee mugs. Even the air felt dense, thick with anticipation and the faint smell of ozone from overworked circuits. Then, with a flicker and a mechanical click, the main view screen came to life. Admiral Trenholm's face filled the display, sharp, severe, every line of his expression carved in authority. His eyes were the color of cold iron, steady and unreadable. Zeke straightened instinctively, posture rigid. "Yes, sir. We're en route. ETA, 30 minutes. Trenholm gave no nod of approval, no flicker of emotion. His voice cut through the cabin, precise as a blade. "Good. And remember, take any liberty necessary to secure and destroy that fracture." A pause, measured, deliberate, Intel shows heavy resistance. Firepower well beyond standard parameters. You are doing this for the good of us all. That is all. Out. The screen went black with a soft final click. For a long moment, no one moved. The ship's hum filled the silence, a ghostly rhythm under the weight of the Admiral's words. Zeke exhaled, slow and tight, running a hand along his jaw as if trying to scrape away the heaviness that had settled there. His reflection ghosted across the blank monitor, eyes drawn, face unreadable. Eliza stood beside him, arms folded, her gaze fixed on the dark screen. The dim glow of the consoles painted her features in blue and gold, catching the faint twitch of tension along her jaw. Neither spoke, but the phrase echoed between them, heavy and cold. Take any liberty necessary. They both knew what it meant, and neither of them liked it. Finally, Eliza shifted, her tone sharp with the effort of sounding casual. "Well," she muttered, forcing a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. "That sounds promising." Zeke's laugh came out as a dry breath. "Yeah, promising." The silence returned, carried only by the murmur of the engines. Outside, the void stretched endless and dark, flecked with the faint glimmer of distant stars. Ahead, somewhere beyond the static and shadow, the mission awaited. Next chapter. The ship settled in the shadow of a rocky outcrop, just beyond radar sweep. Its engines wound down with a soft mechanical sigh, leaving the wind to fill the silence, low and restless as it moved through the barren terrain. Before them stretched the Waterford region, a wasteland of broken industry and fortified sprawl. Crumbling walls leaned against steel towers. Searchlights swept the ruins in slow, predatory arcs. Enemy patrols stalked the ground below, armored figures glinting in the dusk. Somewhere among them, unseen but near, the fracture pulsed like a heartbeat in the dark. Inside the ship, the team gathered around the glowing tactical table. The map's shifting light cast their faces in pale blue, every contour sharpened by focus and fatigue. Silas stepped forward and drew a deep blue case from his pack. The latch hissed as it opened. Within, 5 small drones gleamed, sleek, compact, their metallic shells polished to a mirror finish. Each was no larger than a fist, but alive with quiet potential. "Here are the drones," Silas said. Sky leaned closer, tracing the air just above them as though afraid to break the spell. 5 units, 2 PDAs on each. Silas gave a faint smile. "Exactly." And as an added kick in the face, he tapped one of the devices inside the case. "Those PDAs will trigger a secondary portal back to the target pad here." He gestured to the holographic table, where a secondary extraction point flickered in readiness. "No evidence left behind," he said, snapping the case shut. "Might even buy us a few favors with the good Admiral." Zeke didn't hesitate. His voice cut through the hum. "Go." At once, the drones lifted. They slipped from the ship's open hatch, silent as thought, vanishing into the twilight. Their blackened frames dissolved against the clouds until even the faint glimmer of their lights disappeared. The first move had been made. Now there was nothing left but the waiting and the wind. Next chapter. The drones slipped through the night like whispers of machinery, small, sleek phantoms sliding across the sleeping city. Their shells shimmered once, then vanished into stealth mode, leaving only the faintest ripple of air behind them. Below, Waterford sprawled in ruin and shadow. Cracked smokestacks bled thin threads of vapor. Rooftops gleamed with dew and soot. The drones darted between them, weaving through the veins of the city as if guided by instinct. Inside the blimp, Silas leaned over the glowing monitors. The feeds painted his face in shifting hues of blue and green. His eyes followed each movement, steady, analytical, alive with quiet purpose. "Good so far," he murmured, fingers turning a dial. "Just a little farther." Everything was proceeding perfectly. The drones were nearly in position. Until a flicker crossed one of the screens. A shadow moved at the edge of the feed. Silas zoomed in. Perched atop a steam vent was a bird, massive, sharp-beaked, its feathers mottled with soot and oil. Steam coiled around it like breath from the underworld. Its eyes glowed faintly in the camera's light, locked onto something unseen. Silas's shoulders stiffened. "We might have a problem." Zeke entered the control bay, arms crossed. The change in Silas's tone was enough. "What is it? What are we looking at?" Silas enlarged the image. The creature flared its wings, releasing a hiss that looked almost like smoke. "Steam vent birds," he said flatly. From the far corner, Sky looked up from her console. "Steam vent bird? Silas rubbed at the bridge of his nose, exhaling. They nest on the old vent stacks. Mean as hell. Territorial as soldiers. On the monitor, the bird screeched, a harsh metallic sound, and lunged toward the nearest drone, its wings cutting through the fog like blades. Steam boiled around it, bright as firelight. Silas's tone dropped, quiet but certain. This, he said, could cause real problems. The steam vent bird lifted from its perch, wings outstretched like living machinery. Steam wreathed its form as it fixed its gaze on the drones, eyes bright with predatory focus. It didn't merely move, it hunted. Zeke's voice cut through the tension. "Do they have any weapons?" Silas's hands hovered over the console, his jaw tight. "None. Strictly recon." The bird struck. It dropped like a projectile, wings slicing through the vapor. In a blink, it was upon one of the drones, talons locking tight around the fragile metal body. A sharp crack filled the cabin speakers as the image spasmed and blurred, metal buckling under monstrous force. The damaged drone's camera feed, miraculously, was still transmitting. The image steadied on the bird's nest, where the creature now rested, massive wings folded. The ruined drone clutched like prey it didn't quite understand. The team leaned closer. On screen, the bird tilted its head, inspecting the crushed metal. It pecked once, twice, testing as if trying to puzzle out its nature. Sky's voice softened. "It doesn't see them as a threat." Silas nodded faintly, his expression unreadable. Curious doesn't mean harmless. On the monitor, the bird ruffled its feathers and settled, steam curling through its plumage. The city's haze shimmered around it like heat mirage. "All right," Silas murmured, fingers tightening on the controls. "We keep going. Quietly this time." The remaining drones pushed forward, weaving through the smog, past towers and vents, still breathing thin trails of light. Silas exhaled, one drone gone. But the mission was still alive, and the night had more surprises waiting. Next chapter. The drones hovered high above the target, invisible shadows against the dark canvas of night. Below, the fracture pulsed faintly, its light buried beneath the sprawling encampment. The massive tent shifted with the wind, its fabric rippling like the surface of restrained power. Silas leaned toward the monitors, eyes steady, breath shallow. "Lucky for us, fractures only form above ground," he murmured, adjusting the view. The feed revealed an ironclad zone. The soldiers moved in synchronized patterns, black and red uniforms cutting through the glare of floodlights. The perimeter bristled with weaponry. Missile turrets, railguns, and towers of reinforced steel, all trained outward like a single mechanical beast waiting to strike. The drones began their descent, gliding on whispering currents. Their matte surfaces absorbed the light, melting seamlessly into shadow. Beneath the tent, the world turned dim and tense. Silas's fingers hovered over the console. The drones slipped under the canvas, every movement measured to avoid even a flutter. Then mechanical arms extended. 4 PDAs dropped soundlessly, each one landing with surgical precision, no louder than a breath. No alarms, no shouts, no sudden movement. The drones ascended again, vanishing into stealth mode, holding position above the camp like ghosts returned to the night. Silas released a slow exhale. Drop complete. Zeke stood near the hatch, his gaze fixed on the tactical table's glow, the live feeds painting his face in cold light. "Go time on my call." Eliza adjusted the straps of her uniform, her expression a mask of composure. Sky rolled her shoulders, small arcs of blue energy sparking at her fingertips, restless, electric anticipation gathering around her like a storm held at bay. Zeke shifted the weight on his back. Cogwave rested silent inside the pack, compressed and waiting. The AI's sensors glimmered faintly through the seams, aware, listening, patient. And then there was Snow. She sat apart, motionless. Her white dress pooled around her in soft folds, almost luminescent against the steel interior. The black blindfold hid her eyes, but her stillness carried weight. When she spoke, her voice was calm, unwavering. "I'm ready." Zeke turned toward Silas. "If things go south, come in guns blazing." Silas leaned back, a crooked grin pulling at the edge of his mouth. "Oh, I wouldn't miss it." The hum of the ship deepened, the air thickening with expectation. The mission was set. Now all that remained was to step into the fire. Next chapter. The PDAs came alive in flawless rhythm, each one pulsing with a soft inner light that barely touched the harsh glare of the Dominion floodlights. And then, in a blink of light and static hum, Eliza, Zeke, Sky, and Snow stood at the base of the fracture. The world around them was motion and noise, marching boots, clipped orders, the grind of machinery, but Snow barely heard it. The pull of the fracture consumed her. It called, and she answered. She moved as though she'd done this 100 times. Her hands rose, fingers trembling just above the shimmering surface. The air bent around her, light warping as invisible forces folded inward. The fracture shuddered. Its radiance flared once, then imploded. Within 10 seconds it was gone. The light died, the hum ceased, the world steadied. Eliza leaned forward, voice low. Now. They pressed the PDAs on their belts. A flash, 4 bursts of green light, and they were gone. For a heartbeat, everything in the camp remained ordinary. Soldiers continued their rounds. The rhythm of machinery held steady. The comms buzzed softly, unaware that anything had changed. Then, slowly, a ripple of unease spread. A guard turned toward the fracture site, brow furrowing. Another followed his gaze. The commander, broad-shouldered, scarred, eyes like sharpened steel, strode forward, boots grinding against the parched ground. He stopped where the fracture had once pulsed, staring into the empty air. His mouth twisted. Did we have a rolling feed on that thing? No one answered. The soldiers exchanged uncertain looks, the silence stretching thin. The ground before them was bare, no scorch marks, no light, no trace. The fracture had been there. They were certain of it. Now it was nothing, as though it had never existed at all. Next chapter. The hum of the ship softened to a low murmur, the metallic rhythm easing into calm. The tension of the mission still lingered like static in the air, but the hard edge of it had begun to fade. For the first time in hours, the crew could breathe. Zeke emerged from the rear compartment, no longer the soldier in black. He'd traded the uniform for plain civilian clothes, muted fabric, unassuming. A man shedding his armor. He adjusted his collar, rolling his shoulders as though shaking loose the weight of command, if only for a night. Since we're close to home, he said, tone steady but quiet. I'm staying here. A day or two. There's something I need to check on. No one argued. As he passed them, he gave each a small fist to the shoulder, simple, wordless recognition. Good work, he said. Eliza's mouth tugged into a brief smirk. Sky's blue aura dimmed to a soft shimmer, fading like moonlight at dawn. Silas, leaning back in his chair, raised a hand in lazy salute. Try not to get lost, boss. Zeke huffed out a quiet laugh but didn't answer. The ship's hatch slid open. A rush of cool night air swept in, carrying the scent of old brick, rain-soaked metal, and the faint hum of Waterford alive in the distance. The city breathed in low tones, engines, chatter, the rhythm of streets that never truly slept. Without looking back, Zeke stepped into the dark. Behind him, on the tactical table, the PDAs flickered once, tiny lights blinking out one by one. Then silence. Next chapter. Zeke stepped into his apartment. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing the quiet in. The air was stale, dust, old coffee, a faint metallic edge that clung to the walls. He sighed, rolled his shoulders, and headed for the kitchen. The faucet squealed once before spilling a stream of ice-cold water into the sink. He let out a dry laugh. Nothing changes. Leaving the tap running, he snagged a bottle from the counter, twisted the cap, and wandered into the living room. The couch met him with a tired groan, the cushions sinking as if remembering him. He stretched out, thumbed the remote, and the view screen hummed to life. The headline crawled across the bottom in bright red. Breaking. Fracture vanishes in Waterford. On screen, a soldier stood before the cameras, uniform pristine, voice rich with authority. We are pleased to report that the fracture that plagued Waterford has been eliminated. Our forces worked tirelessly to secure the area and ensure the safety of the region. Zeke took a slow drink, the bitterness matching his smile. Sure you did. The footage cut to the site, empty ground, soldiers pacing in victory poses before nothing. The commander kept talking, his confidence polished, his truth absent. Zeke flipped the screen off. The apartment sank back into silence, save for the low hum of the water still running in the kitchen. He pulled out his communicator. Messages flooded the display. Hastings. Any idea when you'll be back? Even a day or two of training would help. Ryder. Call me when you get a chance. Drink soon? Bethany. Several missed calls. He hadn't answered. Too busy. Too tired. Tomorrow, he muttered. I'll see her tomorrow. Then one new notification. Naomi. He didn't open the message. What caught his eye was the profile picture. He zoomed in. Naomi, Walter, and a baby. A baby? A banner stretched beneath them. His name is James. Zeke froze. His breath slowed. The bottle rested forgotten in his hand. He stood and moved to his bedroom, wordless. The bag sat where it always had. Worn canvas, frayed seams. He knelt beside it, reached inside, and pulled out an old photograph. His mother and aunt smiled up from the worn paper, each holding a child, himself and Bethany, their faces full of light, captured in a world that had not yet hardened. He glanced between the two images, the old and the new. Naomi's smile matching his mother's and aunt's, the same joy, the same unguarded love. Zeke exhaled. The sound was soft but heavy. He set both the photograph and communicator on the nightstand. His gaze drifted to the watch on his wrist, the steady pulse of its second hand marking time he couldn't reclaim. He turned off the light and let the dark take him. Next chapter. Silas closed the door behind him and exhaled, the sound caught somewhere between relief and fatigue. The mission was over. They were back. The pulse of adrenaline had long since faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the bass and the ache of effort behind his ribs. He rolled his shoulders and moved to the small kitchenette. The kettle clicked softly as it came to life, filling the silence with its gentle hiss. A few moments later, steam rose from a cup of tea, curling through the air like breath on a cold morning. Cup in hand, he crossed to his desk and sat down. The chair gave a soft creak as he leaned back, eyes drifting over the clutter before him. Piles of mail, scattered notes, folded schematics. Damn thing's multiplying, he muttered. He began to sift through the stack, flicking past invoices, reports, and old field memos, until one envelope caught his attention. The name was stamped cleanly in bold script, Professor Greaves. He hesitated a moment before tearing it open. Beneath it lay a thin journal, Birds of the Steam World. A particularly sour-looking steam vent bird scowled from the cover, feathers puffed and eyes gleaming. Silas couldn't help a dry smirk. Figures, he murmured, setting it aside. Then he unfolded the letter. Well, Professor, he said under his breath, what have you got for me this time? The handwriting was neat, deliberate. But as he read on, the tone shifted, from scholarly to strained, from observation to warning. The words began to blur as he moved further down the page, the rhythm of his breath slowing. Then he reached it, a single sentence that froze him in place. His grip faltered. Crash! The teacup slipped from his hand, shattering against the floorboards. The scent of spiced tea rose sharply into the air as liquid spread across the wood. Silas didn't move. The letter trembled in his fingers. The lines of ink stared back at him, heavy and absolute. It wasn't a warning at all, it was a breakthrough. It could be the key to end this mess. Next chapter. Eliza and Skye stepped into the main hall, and at first glance everything seemed normal. Engines thrummed, sparks hissed from welding torches, voices echoed through the iron rafters. Yet beneath it all, there was something else, an undercurrent, faint, but undeniable. The air itself felt charged. Eliza slowed her pace. Her hand brushed the side of her communicator. "Hello, my darlings," she said lightly, her tone all charm and velvet, but the edge beneath it was unmistakable. "I'd love to bring you good news, but be ready. If I call, you meet at the blimp. Immediately." A beat of static. Then Skye's voice came back, steady, questioning. "What is it? Do you sense something, or—" Eliza's gaze swept the hall, taking in every motion, every glance that lingered too long. "I trust my intuition," she said. The words were calm, but her gut was coiled tight. They turned down the corridor toward the briefing wing. The overhead lights flickered once, dimming just long enough to raise the hair on the back of her neck. "Did you see the battle robots behind us?" Eliza murmured, voice barely more than breath. 40 steps, keeping pace. Skye didn't turn. Her eyes shifted to a reflection in a polished steel panel. There they were, 3, maybe 4 units, their chrome-black bodies gliding through the light. Too aligned, too quiet, too interested. Skye's tone stayed level. Noted, Eliza's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. Her fingers hovered near the clasp on her belt. Then let's play it right. The base wasn't a battlefield. Not yet. But as the hum deepened and the shadows began to move with purpose, Eliza could feel it in her bones. It soon would be. Eliza and Skye kept walking, their pace measured but taut with silent calculation. Beneath the calm exterior, both felt the tremor, the sense that the air itself had turned against them. Eliza tensed. Trenholm didn't waste time, she muttered, acting without question, and fast. Without breaking stride, she tapped her communicator, her tone smooth but carrying steel beneath the charm. Bad news, my dears. Meet at the blimp, immediately. Don't be late. They rounded the corner and stopped cold. A soldier waited ahead, posture stiff, eyes darting. Around him stood 4 battle robots, red optics glowing in unison as they locked onto their targets. The soldier placed a hand on his holster, his voice trembling. Admiral Trenholm has asked us to accompany you both to the brig. Eliza didn't blink. She moved first. One sharp step forward, a blur of motion, her fist driving upward into his chin. The crack echoed down the hall. The man was unconscious before his body hit the floor. The robots responded instantly, weapons whirring to life, but Eliza was already moving. In one fluid motion, she drew both blades from their thigh sheaths. Steel gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Strike. A flash of motion. 2 bots convulsed as her blades tore through their lower flanks, the one weak point in their armor. Sparks erupted. Circuits screamed. Both machines collapsed in spasms of electric light. The remaining 2 turned, rifles charging. But Skye was faster. She lifted her hand, palm out. A brilliant surge of Sol energy burst from her fingertips. The impact shredded both machines in an explosion of blue fire and molten steel. Gunfire flared deeper down the corridor. Skye pivoted, her other hand sweeping forward. A second Sol spiral bloomed into existence, solidifying into a shimmering barrier of light that made the rounds ricochet into nearby glass, shattering it to pieces. Eliza looked at the approaching soldiers and robots. They weren't out to detain us, she growled. This was about elimination. Skye's gaze cut sideways, calm but cold. I'm with you. Eliza grabbed Skye's wrist. Follow me fast. She keyed her communicator, voice sharp enough to cut through chaos. All units, meet at the blimp, 2 minutes. If we're not there, you move. No hesitation. They ran, boots hammering against the metal floor, alarms beginning to wail behind them. The moment Eliza's first message crackled through the communicator, Silas moved. There was no time to ask questions. No time to think. He grabbed a small bag from the side of his desk, shoving whatever he could fit inside. Tools, personal items, a few essentials. His hand brushed against the letter from Professor Greaves. Without hesitation, he stuffed it in. He wasn't leaving that behind. The blimp was 5 hallways down. The distance felt longer than it should. He reached into his pocket and sighed with relief. 2 of the PEDs were still there. The emergency teleport devices, preset to the blimp. He had meant to use them as a backup measure during the mission, but now they were his best way out. Silas took a final look around the room, knowing there was no coming back. Then with one last exhale, he pressed the escape button. In a flash of green light, he was gone. The instant Eliza's message hit the comms, Cogwave's processors lit with cascading calculations. Probability of betrayal, 87%. Probability of immediate danger, 94%. Time to act now. Target, Snow's quarters. He moved through the base's dim corridors like a shadow made of steel. Servo joints whispered. Optics flickered low. Each step was pre-measured, each turn an algorithm executed with flawless precision. As expected, a guard stood outside her door, a bulky man with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, gum snapping between his teeth. "No way you're getting in there," the guard drawled. "Orders from the top." Cogwave paused, head tilting just slightly. If he were capable of irritation, this might have been the moment. Instead, calculation. Solution acquired. His frame compressed. Plates folded inward with a soft hiss of hydraulics until his entire body collapsed into the form of a gleaming gear. It rolled once, twice, silent and swift. By the time the guard looked down in confusion, Cogwave was already gone. A faint clink beneath his boots, then silence. Inside, Snow sat motionless on the edge of her cot, her white dress faintly luminous under the sterile light. The black blindfold hid her eyes, but not the calm that radiated from her stillness. A caretaker stood nearby, startled as Cogwave unfolded from the floor, gears and pistons rearranging into his familiar humanoid form. "We have to go," he said, voice sharp with purpose. The caretaker stepped forward, frowning. Where are you taking her? Cogwave's optics narrowed, faint blue light glowing from within. His arm shifted, inner mechanisms preparing for emergency extraction. To safety. No hesitation, no elaboration. She rose without a word, her movements eerily graceful, as though she'd known this moment was coming. He reached for the door. Stay close. The alarms began to sound. Eliza and Skye sprinted down the corridor, boots hammering against the metal floor, the echo of pursuit right behind them. A mix of soldiers and battlebots rounded the far corner, measured, methodical, but closing fast. The dear Admiral didn't think to revoke my top-secret clearance, Eliza quipped between breaths, swiping her keycard across the panel. The heavy door slid open with a hiss. An empty R&D chamber stretched before them, dark, silent, waiting. Eliza grinned. Perfect. The boys are sleeping. Wouldn't want them to get hurt. Skye slipped inside, scanning the shadows, breath steadying. I thought this section was sealed. It is, Eliza said, gesturing toward the far wall. But that wall leads directly to the landing bay. Skye's hand lifted, fingertips beginning to glow with blue sol energy. Then I'll make us a door. But before she could release it, the doors behind them exploded inward. A squad of bots stormed through, red optics burning, weapons online. Eliza sighed. I guess the soldiers are too scared to face you. Skye didn't respond. Her hand flicked forward, releasing a torrent of soul energy that rolled like a living storm. The blast struck the floor. Boom! Dozens of sol orbs ricocheted through the lab, detonating in a chaotic chain of blue fire. Bots staggered, limbs tearing apart under the shock waves. Sparks rained like falling stars. But some still stood, charred, limping, firing blindly through the smoke. This'll take focus, Skye muttered, energy flaring around her as she shifted to defense. Eliza was already moving. Her new sol pistol spun into her hands with a practiced flourish. She fired in controlled bursts, each shot a clean, surgical strike to a vulnerable joint or sensor. One bot dropped, then another, then another. Skye turned back to the wall, eyes burning with light. She gathered the last of her power, the air trembling around her. Move! She hurled it. Boom! The impact shook the lab, throwing both women backward as metal screamed and tore apart. When the dust cleared, a gaping wound stretched across the wall, revealing a second layer of reinforced plating. Eliza's smirk faded, replaced by cold focus. Trenholm thought of everything. The bots advanced through smoke and flame, their red eyes cutting through the chaos. The wall was holding, and time was running out. Skye's breath came fast, uneven. Her hands trembled, the air around her alive with static and smoke. I don't know if I can do this, she said quietly, half to Eliza, half to herself. Eliza didn't blink. Her mind was already running ahead. Would more energy help? Skye hesitated. Yes, but this is all I have left. Eliza's lips curved into that daring smirk, the kind that usually preceded trouble. Then do me a favor, love. Take a look behind you. Behind her loomed the tank, massive, filled with reverse-engineered sol, white, unstable, volatile. Eliza's pistol was already drawn. 2 clean shots. Bang, bang. The tank ruptured. For a single heartbeat, silence. Then chaos. The white sol erupted outward, tearing across the room like a storm unbound. It lashed at the walls, searing metal and stone alike, each strike painting the lab in blinding light. Skye stumbled back, eyes wide. I can try. She reached out, palms open, voice trembling. The wild white energy surged toward her. It collided with her blue sol in a dazzling burst. 2 forces spiraling, merging, colliding until the boundaries vanished. Blue bled into white. White folded into blue. The colors became one. She screamed, not in fear, but in release, as the energy wrapped around her, a living tempest of light and sound. Her silhouette burned against the chaos. And then, control. Skye's eyes snapped open, glowing with both colors at once, brilliant azure laced with searing white. The merged sol formed around her like a heartbeat, rippling with impossible force. She thrust her hands forward. Boom! The lab detonated in a wave of radiance, hundreds of sol bursts flaring across the room, tearing the remaining bots apart. Some blue, some white, some caught between both, flickering violently before fading to dust. Skye turned toward the wall. With one final motion, she unleashed the storm. The reinforced metal didn't resist, it disintegrated. Eliza grabbed Skye's wrist. Let's go. They sprinted through the molten opening. emerging onto the landing pad as the unstable soul storm tore through the lab behind them, spilling out like a living force of nature, chasing their heels. The sky ahead blazed with firelight and smoke. There was no turning back now. Eliza and Sky sprinted up the ramp, lungs burning, the sting of ozone and smoke clinging to their skin. Faint traces of Sol energy still shimmered around them, blue and white sparks drifting through the air like dying fireflies. Inside, the blimp's interior hummed, a deep, steady rhythm. Silas, Snow, and Cogwave greeted them. Eliza nodded. "I said 2 minutes," she huffed, gripping the console. "That was at least 5. Sally rotated her sleek metallic head. "They said if I lifted off without you, I would be smelted." Eliza barked a short laugh, half relief, half exhaustion. "Everyone accounted for. Take off. Let's go." The deck rumbled. A low, rising roar filled the air as the blimp's thrusters engaged. The landing pad dropped away beneath them, shrinking into the glow of the night. Through the viewport, Sky turned for one last look. The base was still ablaze with flickering Sol light and rising smoke. And there, on the edge of the platform, stood a single figure. It was Trenholm. His coat whipped in the wind, face unreadable in the glow of the retreating engines. He tilted his head slightly, a small sound escaping him, something between irritation and amusement. Then he turned and walked back inside. The blimp climbed higher, its hull catching the moonlight as it rose through the clouds. Below them, the base shrank to a shadow, the chaos dimming into distance. Above them, the sky opened wide. They had escaped.
City lights and scattered dreams flicker in the distance, lost in the seams. Rooftop cat curled on your lap, soft purrs and time slipping past. Toast to being fools led astray, laugh at the world as it fades away. Lies like shadows drifting by, but tonight don't ask why. Raise a glass to the ones who've gone, to the ghosts of past still holding on, to the monsters we called home, and the strangers we've become alone. But here on this rooftop under the sky, for a moment it's just you and I. Told myself I'd always fight, keep the darkness from stealing light. You say you tried to do the same, we both were chasing different names. We toast to being fools led astray, laugh at the world as it fades away. Lies like shadows drifting by, but tonight we don't ask why. Raise a glass to the ones who've gone, to the ghosts of past still holding on, to the monsters we called home, and the strangers we've become alone. But here on this rooftop under the sky, for a moment it's just you and I. I never was the killer they thought, you never found the way back you sought. We sit here in the midnight glow, two lost souls with nowhere to go. So raise a glass, let the moment stay before the dawn takes it away. No regrets, no need to hide, just two fools side by side. So raise a glass, let the moment stay before the dawn takes it all away. No regrets, no need to hide, just two fools side by side. So raise a glass, let the moment stay before the dawn takes it away. No regrets, no need to hide, just two fools